You know that GameCube was codenamed Dolphin, but did you know Panasonic Q was codenamed Mermaid? Or that just the first Q model was supposed to be silver and Panasonic was gonna release one every year with new colors and features? Q was triple the size of a regular GameCube, twice as heavy, and came with features that made it the best way to play. It released the same day as Animal Crossing, and in a way, was a successor to the original PlayStation. Q's launch price was the exact same as PS2, but outclassed it by every measure, as a console and a DVD player. Unfortunately, Nintendo had little interest helping it succeed, and Panasonic gave up as soon as it launched. They never dropped the price when it was floundering, cooked up any bundles, or aired a single commercial. With basically zero marketing, most of its Japanese target audience never knew it existed. Q was coveted by Western Nintendo fans, but despite making its world debut in America, Panasonic never ended up releasing it outside Japan. Those decisions led to the system selling under 100,000 units, making it extremely rare nowadays, valued in the thousands of dollars, plus more for its accessories. This is the full story of the Panasonic Q. Headquartered in Osaka, Panasonic's best known today for premium TVs, but in the 90s, DVD and CD players were their bread and butter. They dipped their toe in video game waters a few times though. In 1993, they produced 3DOs. In 1996, they were going to make a sequel system called M2, which ended up getting canceled. And in 2010, they revealed the Panasonic Jungle, but canceled that one too. More central to this story is when Nintendo decided to switch from cartridges to mini DVDs and chose Panasonic as their partner. They wanted them to develop the disc drive in every GameCube, because disc readers were their specialty, and Nintendo didn't know much about them. Which was basically the same reason they partnered with Sony to develop the SNES CD drive the decade before, and we all know how that turned out. As part of the agreement, Panasonic got a license to implement GameCube technology into a device of their own. Nintendo made similar deals in the past, first with Sharp, who made the Twin Famicom in the 80s, then with Sony in the 90s to make PlayStations with Super Famicom cartridge slots, and in the 2000s, the third hybrid would be made by Panasonic, who at the time was Sony's biggest rival. They were the two largest consumer electronics corporations, not only in Japan, but the entire world, constantly vying to dominate and eat each other's market share. For Nintendo, as the old saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In 1999, Nintendo announced development of their next-gen Dolphin console, followed by Panasonic sharing plans for a DVD-CD Dolphin fusion machine called Mermaid. At E3 2001, Nintendo showed Americans the newly renamed GameCube, and Panasonic revealed Mermaid's first prototype. A few months later, the final form factor was exhibited at Space World. Side by side, you can see the differences compared to the earlier design. It's worth highlighting that Nintendo limited Mermaid to the show floor and never mentioned it on stage. Whenever press asked, their response was basically, Panasonic's hybrid system is high quality, but we have no further comment. Because as far as Nintendo was concerned, they'd rather you buy a normal GameCube so they could keep all the hardware profits. Nintendo's traditional audience was kids and teenagers, and now with GameCube, they were aging up to target young adults. Mermaid was going to launch a couple months later and target a different demographic, parents in their 30s with children, which is why it was branded not as a console, but as a DVD player that as a bonus could also play video games. If Panasonic could get this new group of people into the ecosystem and thus expand GameCube's user base, Nintendo could make money selling them games. Panasonic got to profit off the hardware and expand their market share for DVD players against Sony. That was the business strategy, and it's why a lot of hardcore gamers never heard about Mermaid, because Nintendo didn't want them to. They wished it well, but didn't want to cannibalize their own hardware sales. That said, Japanese magazines were still pretty hyped for it. Nintendo Dreams said the glass surface was so clear you could use its reflection to shave your face. Famitsu praised the controller port's luxurious blue glow and said among the Nintendo fans they surveyed, some were canceling their day one GameCube purchase to wait for Mermaid. Panasonic was pleased with its reception and planned to release a new Mermaid model every year with new features and designs, just like their other lines of DVD players. By the way, that's why the product code ends with an S, to identify this first one as the silver model. But then, a month after Space World, things took a turn for the worse. Because on September 14th, 2001, Nintendo launched GameCube in Japan. And it didn't do as well as they expected. Early morning retail lines were short, and by the end of its first weekend, only sold 300,000 units. PS2 launched a year and a half earlier and sold 1 million in its first weekend. By the time GameCube launched, PS2 already sold more in Japan than it would in its entire lifetime. Nintendo lost the console war before they even set foot on the battlefield. Mermaid's coming out party was a few weeks later, but as GameCube struggled leading up to it, Panasonic appeared to lose faith. The big day was at CTech 2001, the Japanese equivalent of CES. Mermaid's official name was revealed as Q, along with its logo designed to look like a cube and the letter itself. And for the very first time, the protective glass was removed and people got to test drive some games. But even with launch just weeks away, Panasonic was now uncertain how to price it and when to release. They issued a survey with questions like, "What do you think is a reasonable maximum price?" Which didn't look great. Just imagine if Xbox revealed a new Pro model, then went around asking people what's the most they'd be willing to pay for it. Sort of embarrassing, honestly, and doesn't project a lot of confidence. They ended up pushing launch back to December 14th, exactly 3 months after GameCube. That was the same day as Animal Crossing, so technically you could call it a launch title, but it might have just been a coincidental Friday. At CTech, Panasonic was explicitly conscious of Sony's pricing and ended up choosing the exact same launch price as PS2, 39,800 yen, which is about $300. Nowadays, some people look back and blame Q's failure on being too expensive, but it was actually better bang for your buck than what Sony was offering. For playing games, a standard GameCube's already more powerful than PS2. And Q could improve your gaming experience even further. It had 2 new audio features, Bass Plus mode for boosting low-end frequencies via subwoofer, and surround mode for widening stereo into pseudo surround sound, which could make a big difference for someone who, for example, had a decent TV but not a home theater. Though if you did have a home theater, it'd support that too. Another minor feature was a timer you could set on the LCD for parents who wanted to limit their kids' TV time. PS2 was a console first and a media player second. Q was the other way around and outshined it there as well. Watching DVDs was crisper with sharper colors. The audio was better too, with a higher bitrate and subwoofer jack that PS2 didn't have. Q also featured dialogue enhancer and cinema modes and came with a remote. Q's fan was silent so you wouldn't hear an annoying whir watching movies. Listening to CDs was more convenient too, thanks to the remote, top buttons, and backlit LCD. And it could play a wider range of formats like VCDs and MP3 CDs. All that to say, not only was Q better than PS2 in every way, it was also better value. Unfortunately, Sony got aggressive in defending their position. So they cut PS2's price ahead of GameCube's launch, then again right before Q came out. With PS2's now $240, Q's value looked less impressive. But it was still more than fair, as standard GameCubes were $200 and standalone Panasonic DVD players also cost $200. Q gave you everything plus extra for $300. In the past, we've noted how failed hardware like Satellaview and 64DD launched mail order only instead of in stores, which limited sales potential. But Panasonic didn't half-ass it. You could get Q at game shops, electronics and DVD stores, online, and you could even pre-order them at Loppies. Those are terminals in thousands of convenience stores across Japan that also sold pre-orders for regular GameCubes and its games. If you saw our video on the Nintendo Power System, you'll remember Loppies are also where you could download Game Boy and Super Famicom games. These services were concurrent, by the way. You could literally buy Famicom Bunko and pre-order Q in the same visit. Panasonic made a great machine and all the right moves, but it was apparent they'd hitched their wagon to a falling star. So they announced they were only gonna produce 15,000 units a month. They never showed off Q at another expo, did any promotional interviews, aired a single TV commercial, or spent a penny on magazine ads. With zero marketing, it also suffered a lack of organic coverage, and most of the target audience never heard about it. Even as it was struggling to sell that modest 15,000 a month, Panasonic never dropped the price or cooked up any bundles. They gave up, basically. Without announcement, they silently stopped producing Qs and canceled plans to make a new model every year. At C-Tech, they had also shown a prototype GameCube built into a car media hub, but it was never seen again. They said they might produce other accessories too, but never did, except for one we'll get to later. For the most part, they were done supporting Nintendo. Panasonic and the mass market quickly forgot about Q, but there were some enthusiasts who loved it. Not a lot of Japanese people were buying GameCubes, but those who did, about 4% splurged for the Q. It attracted a cult following of Westerners too, who saw it not as a DVD player, but a premium GameCube, a forbidden fruit from the land of the rising sun. Q could only play Japanese discs, but specialty shops satiated demand by importing them abroad and modding them to make them region-free. Buying one would run you $400 to $500, but for some, the window it opened to Japan was worth the premium. Normal GameCubes are region-locked, but with an import Q, you could play everything, including Japanese games, months before they released overseas. And some games were only available on Japanese disc, like Donkey Konga 3 or the Miyamoto-produced adventure sim Gift Pia, a bit of a hidden gem that Famitsu gave a gold award. DVDs were region-locked back then too, so with Q, weebs got to watch anime they otherwise couldn't. Being region-free, you could also play discs from anywhere else in the world, like the English version of Doshin the Giant, which never came out in America, but did in Europe. Likewise, people in other countries could play American discs that came out sooner than their region, if they came out at all. So naturally, importers loved the thing. Nintendo World Report said Panasonic had outdone themselves, praised its beauty and sound, and reviewed it 9.5 out of 10. IGN said it was like owning 2 GameCubes and several DVD players, and suggested Nintendo fans sell equipment they already had to buy one. That said, Q did lose some appeal later on, as region modding regular GameCubes got easier. It still had all the other benefits though. And of course, the aesthetics. It's a heck of a lot bigger than a GameCube too. 3.5 inches taller, 2 deeper, and 1 wider, making it triple the size and twice as heavy. In Japan, that was a hindrance because their homes are smaller and they prefer stuff that requires less space. The boxy shape didn't fit well in their TV cabinets compared to a DVD player or PS2 laid on its side. But Americans thought it was badass.
This is the device that separates the hardcore gamers from regular gamers. If you walk into somebody's living room and they have this in their living room, you can pretty much say that they are a hardcore gamer.
Meanwhile, in Japan, GameCubes were selling so poorly that Nintendo slashed the price to $160 in its first year, then cut it again to $125. PS2s and DVD players were getting cheaper too, but Panasonic held firm at $300, trying not to take a loss on units already produced. By now, even if the target audience wanted a GameCube, it'd make more sense to buy one and a DVD player separately. Retail shops took matters into their own hands and started selling Qs at a discount just to get rid of them. In 2003, Nintendo released the Game Boy Player. It didn't fit on a Q, so Panasonic made one that could. It was the one and only accessory they ever made for it. Together they form the Mega Cube, twice as tall as the stock model. A couple months later, Panasonic posted on their website saying they'd sold the last of their Qs. Americans holding out for a US launch were out of luck, as the few remaining units could only be found in Japanese stores. Reportedly, less than 100,000 sold in its 2-year lifespan. And honestly, it's a shame it never came overseas. GameCube fared better in America than anywhere else, and Q could have sold a lot more stateside. It might have broke 1 million if they kept making them, launched worldwide, did some bundles, price cuts, advertisements, the usual console strategy. But for Panasonic, it wasn't worth the trouble. Digital video exploded the last few years, and their other DVD players were raking in billions. Q wasn't making a dent in their war against Sony either, so why bother? In the years that followed, secondhand Qs got as cheap as $200. But then, just like other failed consoles, prices gradually climbed because so few existed. A decade ago, they were $500. Nowadays, they're thousands. If you want one factory sealed, you're looking at $5 grand minimum, maybe 10. A Game Boy Player's 2,000 all by itself, and even loose controllers are 200. With each passing year, everything Q related gets more valuable, and they'll probably keep going up in the future, till people stop caring about Nintendo, or society collapses entirely. And, well, that's the story of the Q. Strategically ignored by Nintendo, abandoned by Panasonic, and unnoticed by the mass market, but treasured by superfans then, and even more today. Did you also know that we're giving away a Switch 2 or Steam Deck? Check out the video on screen for more. And here's the latest junk that I put out. Special thanks to our translator Jacob and Good Tofu Friday for proofreading. And thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more, and see you next time.